Good day. This is the morning meeting. Don't you know? Thank you for joining. Sean, Dan, and I are going to walk you through the day. We're going to be like cadets at an inaugural ball. We're going to put our arm out. You're going to loop your arm through us. We're going to walk you through the day. And then we're going to talk about stuff. And then we're going to ask you to be part of the conversation because that's what we do here with Peace, Love, and Understanding. The presumption of great for all. No smack in the chat, etc., etc., etc. Glad to have you here. Sean, why are you looking at me like that?
No, I'm reading. I'm reading. I'm not.
Okay. All right. Okay. You're other
You
stuff too.
Europeans are so you
Big.
guys. You
I
Europeans,
know.
man.
Big day here in two-way. We're debuting a new show. Michael Moynihan, one of the finest communicators I know, and journalists, is debuting a show at 4 Eastern time today. More on that in a bit, but you'll want to save time at 4 Eastern time today to watch Michael's show, The Moynihan Report, with his guest, Anthony Weiner, former New York congressman and man about Gotham City. So that's 4 o'clock today. Now, on the schedule today, the president has a signing of executive orders at 3:30 closed press, and then immediately, like with no break whatsoever, heads down to the East Room of the White House where he's doing a big event on education and signing executive order begin the process of abolishing the Department of Education, although he can't really do that without Congress acting. We'll get to that in a moment. That's all he's got on his schedule, but I suspect he'll talk a lot. That's my gut feeling because I'm no dummy. No, don't know what the vice president's doing. Congress is still out in something called Northwood in West London. Lori, you know what that is? Northwood in West London? I don't know what that is, but someplace called Northwood in West London. The defense ministers of and other military leaders of the NATO countries. Not I don't know if the United States is represented or not. They're meeting to talk about Ukraine and Russia as the European nations continue to try to come up with their own plan to get involved in the conversation about what's going to happen with Ukraine and Russia. All right, guys, so much going on. We want to talk with this education event. And sometimes what we try to do here is take advantage of the vast storehouse of expert knowledge that Sean and Dan have about certain types of activities. And today, you've seen the Republicans on the march on saying, get rid of the Department of Education, cut, as Pat Buchanan famously said, the bureaucrats with sandals and beads, restore power to the states and local to run education and do as much as they can to shut down the U.S. Department of Education as possible. So, Sean, you first, and let's do the Republicans first. What's the best messaging for the president today to sell this idea of cutting the Department of Education to the American people?
We are sending education dollars and functions back to the states, closest and more accountable to the people, because Washington has failed you. I was just looking this up a second ago. We are, according to, what is it? Give me 1 second. Shoot. According to the rankings, the world rankings of the Department of Education, we are 15th in the world in the global assessment. So I think there's no question we're spending more money. We're getting fewer results. We need education to be more accountable to the people and to put students first. So I think it's going to be a combination of students, accountability, failure of Washington.
Dan, add whatever you wish to selling the Republican side, and then you'll both do the Democratic side.
Yeah, I mean, I think Sean summarized the Republican side well. The idea that there's so much money spent and it could be more efficient, results should be better. Obviously, the last 4 or 5 years during COVID, public education took a hit, like in terms of reading scores, math scores. So if you just looked at it in a vacuum, you would say we increased spending and the results went in the opposite direction. So let's try something new. I think on the Democratic side, the line.
No, don't do that one yet. Don't do that. Don't do that one yet. Don't do that one yet. Stand by. Sean's going to do it first. Actually, maybe he'll do it first. But let me just add to the Republican side 2 things. One is there are going to be a lot of Republican governors at this event today. That's a huge messaging point for them. And then the other thing, and Sean, you might have said this and I missed it, but parents, not just students, but parents. Post-COVID, Republicans have really been on the march on education by saying we want to empower parents more than educational bureaucrats. All right, Dan, what's the best framing for the Democrats on Trump's gambit to eliminate as much of DOE as possible?
So we haven't seen the executive order, or at least I hadn't as of 8:30 this morning. But the line that they have leaked out is The department will continue to deliver its services, program, and benefits, which is interesting because if there's no department, I'm not sure exactly how you would, continue to deliver like that. Look, for Democrats, the way that I would combat this is highlight the success stories of the services provided and how it has impacted the real lives of real people. Yes, we are 15th in the world, but by most accounts, while our public education system has a lot of areas for improvement, we do public education as a rule for the entire population better than almost any developed country in the world. And results have improved since like 2000, 2001, when No Child Left Behind began to implement national standards. People can debate, the tests or whatnot, but it did begin to lift the bottom up in a lot of states where they were struggling. And so if I were a Democrat, because they're talking about eliminating the entire department, I would highlight where the department has done well to impact the real lives of real people.
So how would you do that, Dan? Just how would you have a press conference with kids? Like, what would you do to highlight that, or just do it rhetorically?
Look, when I worked for Jared Polis, he was on the Education and Labor Committee in the House, and we had an amazing education staffer, and she could have pulled these people out of her sleep who have been impacted, the communities that saw improvements, and yes, you would bring them there. Show don't tell. Like, have real people from their communities have real examples of the kind of trend lines going in the right direction, the way this money made a difference, what a state standard was like prior to the federal government being involved, and how it raised it and how their kids benefited. So, match fire with fire. They're going to bring moms who are frustrated. I'd bring moms that were satisfied.
Don, channel your inner Randy Weingarten. What would you say for the Democrats?
Well, first of all,
I would not have the union.
Yeah, I would keep Randy Weingart away. She's the head of the teachers union. I think there's bipartisan agreement. The last thing you need is and this is one of their moments where if the Democratic Party's smart, they say, thank you. Let us do this. Please don't get out, because she is sort of like the Chuck Schumer right now of the week. If you get out there, don't blow it for us. I would.
So what's their strongest message?
So I think that where I would focus is to find a hole. So children with disabilities, whether it's with physical disabilities or learning disabilities, where the federal government has been able to provide to fill in the gap. And this is where, again, I would say, watch the gap. If the Trump administration is smart today, they'll proactively talk about how they can help get more funds to help students that are in need. Whether it's certain kind of learning or physical disabilities where there's a challenge, blind students, physical capabilities that need additional support. If the Trump administration is smart today, they'll take those issues head on. If they don't, if I were the Democrats, I'd use those openings to say, here are children that wouldn't be able to go to a public school because they couldn't get that bus that picks them up. They couldn't get whatever. But remember, the challenge, and this is, again, where I would say this is where Republicans should be smart about getting ahead of the issue, is the goal is to say, yeah, we're for that on the Republican side. We just don't think there needs to be 80 dudes in Washington to get in the way of it and find 18 little prescriptive ways of delivering that, right? So we shouldn't fight on the merits of what the government can do to help education, especially those in need. The issue, and if Democrats are smart, they'd wait, sit back, look at the holes and say, you know what, Republicans failed to talk about how this group is served. And to Dan's point, it was never served previously because of the costly nature of addressing this particular subset. And this is why we need it. But there's risk for both sides. Republicans need to be on the offensive, taking on some of the ways that Dems will attack them, and Democrats shouldn't come out full union and try to make this about teachers and unions and as opposed to students and parents.
And Mark, one place to follow up on what Sean said, and George W. Bush talked about this in the summer of 2001. A lot of states that got block grants traditionally, the money goes to the middle. It goes to the average student, to the kind of big population in the middle. And it was the people at the bottom and the people at the extreme top that kind of get a little left behind. People don't worry as much about the talented and gifted because sometimes they receive opportunities in private schools or whatnot because of their gifts. But that bottom third in a lot of states, they just, because money doesn't grow on trees, they would not focus on it. And where the federal government kind of came in to try to lift up the bottom, set standards, bring sunshine to the struggles of the bottom. To Sean's point, that is an opening.
Well, and the other thing is,
is.
here's where, I mean, Dan brought this up, and this is what I think where they would be smart. If you're going to get rid of the department, the way it's been explained to me in the past is, hey, we can, for example, let me just give you a stupid thing. School lunches, you know who takes care of those? Dan does. The Department of Agriculture, right? So like
USDA.
USDA. Yeah. I mean, so finding out explaining how these things are going to be addressed and where, as opposed to leaving it out there in the ether to be, discussed, saying, hey, the U.S. Department of Education does this. This is a good task, but what we're going to do is make the Department of Health and Human Services oversee, kids with disabilities, and we're going to make this part of the office of blah blah blah, reducing bureaucracy and da 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 da. If they're smart, they take it head on. Department of Defense has a massive education program because of what they manage the overseas schools. So walking through this, or at least backgrounding it with sheets and briefings, is going to be important.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about town halls. Town halls are an interesting phenomena. They make for great TV when stuff happens, and so they get a lot of coverage. And here's a brief history of town halls during Trump 2.0 since January. First, Republicans started having town halls, and people showed up and complained about Doge. And the Republicans made the accusation, as far as I know, without evidence, although I don't know that it's false, that the people who were coming and complaining and booing and asking hostile questions were astroturfed. They were ginned up by liberal interest groups saying, yeah, let's go to town hall and pose as constituents. Maybe they are constituents, but come in an organized way rather than an organic way. And so the Republican leadership for the House said, stop having town halls. Don't have them because you're just going to get heckled. Then Democrats said, hey, if the Republicans aren't having town halls in their districts, we'll have them. And so they tried to do some of those that mixed results. Then when the Schumer thing started, now when Democrats have town halls, they're facing hostility from the left over the questions of Schumer and leadership. So here's a couple clips from yesterday. One Democrat, one Republican from out west. First, here's Michael Bennet, Democratic senator from Colorado, a man who I once used to go to regularly, the first Popeyes in Northwest Washington. I need to, full disclosure, say Michael and I used to go get Popeyes fried chicken when we first got a Popeyes in Northwest. Very exciting. Here's Michael Bennet, senator from Colorado, getting questions about Chuck Schumer at a town hall last night.
Considering the dire times we are in and the fact that you yourself admitted and were angry that Schumer had no plan in the Democrats' only moment of leverage against Trump, when will you be calling for him to be replaced as minority leader? Thank you.
I would say maybe not yelling at him so much as, but I do think that it is really important that that we are able.
I believe the clip does run a little longer, but perhaps we're short-circuiting.
The American people to know what we're fighting for on their behalf, and I don't think it was clear in this debate that we were. I do think on the leadership question, it's always better to,
Mark, are you there?
Whether folks are in the right
Dan,
place.
it's still running.
And we're certainly going to have that conversation.
Stand by.
It's important for people to know, when it's time to go. We're going to have conversations, I'm sure, in the foreseeable future about all the Democratic leadership.
All right, so I don't know why Dan couldn't see it, but the money line for a lot of the media was it's important for people to know when it's time to go, not a huge vote of confidence for Leader Schumer. So let me show you a second clip. This is Harriet Hagman. She's the at-large congressperson from Wyoming who replaced Liz Cheney. A shorter clip. This is her last night at her town hall getting booed.
So we've been working to introduce bills so that legislatively we can modify both of those.
Right. So guys, if I were a member of Congress and my staff said have a town hall, I'd say, like, all right, who's coming? Who's going to be chosen to ask questions? Can we plant people who are friendly to ask the questions? Like, it seems like too big a risk because, again, TV loves this stuff. TV loves showing clips like this. So again, there's two sides of it. First, let's talk about the disruptor side, not the member side. But if you're someone who wants to ruin some member's town hall and make news, Sean, what are like the tricks of the trade to get that done?
Well, I think part of it goes back to the member side. Unfortunately, how well prepared are they, right? And I mean, in other words, so if you're organizing, you want to know, are these the kind of guys that run scripted town halls, or the ones that allow people to get up? Alexandria, where I live, put out a thing the other night that in order to ask a question, it has to be submitted in advance now, and da-da-da. They're not letting people. And so to me, that's a complete waste of my time. Like if I wanted to go disrupt that thing, I know that, like, yes, we could get a bunch of people and chant and do stuff like that, hold up signs. But if you're looking to get that moment, you want to know the structure of the town hall. So what does that mean? Well, there are groups, both Republican and Democrat groups, that will say, let's go to the town hall, let's do this. There are grassroots groups run by organization, Tea Party Patriots, Occupy Wall Street, Moms for Liberty, who will say there's a town hall, we're going to go down tomorrow, blah, 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 blah. The more sophisticated one says, Dan, you always ask great questions. We're going to make sure you're at the front of the line. We're going to get you a question. So the better groups organize this, like they try to orchestrate stuff. They try to make sure that they get people planted at the front of the line, that they get their questions. And then there are so those are grassroots. Those are like literally groups. And then there's what we call, as you mentioned, AstroTurf, which is paid groups that say, hey, we're paying people $50 to show up at so-and-so's town hall. We're going to give you guys signs. We'll make it look real. So there's a spectrum of outside groups that can be provocateurs at events. And it goes from the individual to the group that's grassroots to the AstroTurf that's paid.
Let me ask a couple questions, and then I'd love Dan to fill in again on the agitator side, not the member side of playing defense. Do you tell people to dress the part? Like if you're going to a Trump, a MAGA member, wear a Leonard Skinner t-shirt, you know what I mean? Like,
I've told people to dress so when we've had events, this is going back, decades now at bigger events, we'll say, hey, remember, this is like Republicans, when they go to an event, I think a lot of times want to put on like a jacket and I'm like, no, guys, remember, this is a jeans and t-shirt kind of thing. So we don't try to I've never done anything where people would deceive, like, hey, show up, I don't want to be
NRA. Well, show up in an NRA t-shirt if you want to be called on at a MAGA district, right?
Right.
I
know they do it, but I've never seen it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, second question for you, and then Dan do his 101. It seems to me, if I were doing this, I've never done this, so I'm asking out of ignorance. If I were doing this, I'd say I want a moment. Like I want to pressure Schumer to go, right? So I want someone to ask a question to Bennett. Are you supporting Schumer? And then I want booing, like loud booing if he doesn't say yes, or loud cheering. So I think about where are the cameras? Where's the audio? How do we make that sound? That cheering as loud as possible. Do you orchestrate it to that degree? Or no?
So it's a good question. I can actually address it better on the member end when we get to this, but I will tell you, because I ran incumbent retention for the NRCC back in 2000, and we did deal with this stuff, how to set up an event from the member side. But from a provocateur side, it's very hard, because look at those venues. You don't know where are they going to put the media, what angles. I mean, and not only that, but you don't know, is that cameraman or woman going to be in the corner? Are they going to be roving for a second? What are the rules that the venue has, or the member has set for the media? So I personally, more than anything, I would say, if we're going to do that, let's have our own camera there on an iPhone. You want it to look organic and viral and natural, as opposed to, hey, here's our big crew. So generally speaking, this is less relying on the media to do your work for you, and your team being like, remember, Dan's going to be in the corner, so stare at him when you're, I would do it more on that end.
Somebody should hire me. I could orchestrate these to make them great. Dan, from the provocateur side, how do you do it?
Yeah, the thing though, Mark, is these are local members of Congress. These events are organized by district directors. They're in school auditoriums, like parks sometimes. So you don't have like a press riser in the back and like obvious spots. Usually the local press is like a person with a little notepad, and maybe you have your own set camera because you want to try to record it. And so the way these have changed is most members of Congress want a crowd. As staff, the last thing you want is your boss went to a town hall and 10 people showed up. So you put them out, like, you know, when a district work week is going to occur, the member's going to be home on the weekend. Your district director will put them out on Facebook. You will pump out to try to get a crowd. And so the DCCC, the outside groups monitor this stuff. And so when they see it, it's like, aha, Mark's going to do it at the auditorium in 2 weeks. And you do try to get people to go. And you do try to like whip up the frenzy of boos and hisses and repetitive questions. More and more people are controlling. You have to like submit ahead of time. Like Sean said, now you have kind of virtual town halls. But what you want is even people who stand up and say, you know, hey, are you afraid to take a question? You know, people who are going to get confrontational, that creates the moment. That creates the kind of tension that you want from an agitator standpoint. Now we can talk about.
Yeah, we're both ready to flip that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's just talk about from the member's point of view. Again, it seems to me, maybe I'm not genuine enough. If I'm a member, I want to create a good moment. I don't want to just leave it to chance if there's a good moment. Do they do that?
Yeah. So
I'd say let's call on my cousin and have him ask me what have I brought back to the district. Do they do that? Do they stage positive moments or no?
So I want to reiterate something that Dan said that's important. I think I ended up 11 different members working for on the House, or total, but almost all of them on the House side. You don't have the staff, right? So your Washington staff is, I'm just trying to remember what, 8, 9, and your district staff is 7, 8. I mean, maybe in spread across a couple of district offices. So the idea of like staffing is relying on some people like at the town hall. I mean, at the venue, hey, can you guys give us 2 people? We're going to have a sign up list in front. And I know, you know, a former so-and-so is going to help out. You don't have the staff to do one of these for real. So I will say this, having worked for a lot of members over the years, they genuinely actually, most of them that do these actually want to do them, to engage and to be part of the process. It has only been the last 6, 7, 8 years where it's gotten to be a lot more contrived. And a lot more contentious because people are setting them up in a very different way. Members back in the day,
social media obviously makes a big difference because now when something happens, it's going to get out there.
But we used to. There was a member back from I'll leave his name out, but like from Pennsylvania that had really started to do master classes and talking to other members on the Republican side about, okay, when you do one of these town halls, you need to have like 12 people that you guarantee are going to come. And then you set like 4 in the front row, 3 to the right, 3 to the, and it creates this diamond effect. And that's so that if something happens, you're getting people on the right, on the left, from behind and from the front yelling that person down. But you've literally created an echo chamber at your event so that you have your guaranteed 20 people show up, sit where they want to. They're your go-to questioners. They're also the go-to protectors. If something goes wrong, they're yelling that person down, responding in a positive way to what you're saying. So, you know,
okay, but do you get down to the level of, I'd say, particularly for a Republican, because it's just the way it works, I'd say if somebody asks a hostile question, the member's going to say, you know, how dare you, and then they're going to chant USA, USA. Like, do they get down to that level of staging?
It depends. Remember, like Dan and I both said, like, you have 6 staffers there. I mean, like, depending on the district.
What about a senator? What about a senator?
No, but I mean, look, to Sean's point, it used to be that you could have 20 staff, 4 volunteer or like basically volunteers, and you were capped at 16. And you would have, usually to Sean's point, like 8 in the district. And yes, Mark, you would organize, okay, we're doing an event in this town. What is the deliverable that we want to highlight? Because usually for member of Congress, it's like, you know, money you got for the school or whatever. And for everyone wondering, Mark's about to catch a flight, so he is looking at his gate. That is why.
All right, I'm gonna leave you guys to have this discussion, talk about Social Security and Elon Musk and whatever else you want to talk about. All I'll say is 3 quick things. Sorry, I have to go. Number 1. Number 2, see you at 6:00 Eastern time tonight on the morning on 2-way tonight. And as Father Guido Sarducci would say, arrivederci America.
All right, so Mark is off here. He literally is at his gate here this morning. But so you would, when I was Jared's chief of staff, we would have meetings leading up to going home to do these town halls. and you would have your district director, and usually you have like super volunteers in every district who you can always rely on, who will come, who basically, God bless them, give a ton of time to organize these things. You would have your messages that you want to drive. You would make your district director would, know who is going to roughly be in the audience. You would talk to them to say, hey, if it isn't brought up, would you ask about Medicaid or Social Security or, whatever themes you want to drive. You would then work on, if you're interrupted, like when I was with Jared, fracking was a huge issue that was roiling through the state. Depending on how you looked at it, he was on the wrong side, politically at the time, kind of in terms of the state of Colorado versus district. But we knew people were going to be in the crowd pressing him to lean harder against it, and people pressing him to back off and, don't harm the economy, et cetera. So we went over what would happen if he was interrupted, what were his lines. To Mark's point, try to get some people who would cheer, but you prepare for it and you tell them you are on camera. Like, at whatever you do, don't lose your cool, don't snap at people. Of course, it happens in the real world sometimes, but you try your best with limited staff and also knowing these are human beings.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I think we've got some issues to talk about. I'll just put a pin in this. That, like, I also think that with respect to like local media, like, I know that Don Beyer from Northern Virginia will do
Sure.
5 of them. Like, the Washington Post is going to go cover a town hall with him. They just don't have the resources.
Totally.
So it's now a question that's the thing. Is somebody capturing this on an iPhone and putting it out? There are trackers from both sides. So if you are a vulnerable member on either side, the NRCC or the DCCC or one of the outside, groups is going to send somebody to your town hall to try to capture a moment. But I will put a pin in this by saying, I think you're going to see fewer and fewer of them because the return on investment, some of the members truly care about getting their constituent feedback. Yeah. And they are now going, this is a joke. Like, I'm getting mocked, or it's a setup. It's not a real attempt to communicate with my constituents. So, it's unfortunate because I do think it's healthy, but it is what it is on both sides.
Well, look, and of course, it's always the question, is it real or contrived? And you don't want to.
I will tell you, I'm glad you brought that up.
You're not wrong.
Because I looked at that Harriet Hageman thing last night. Okay. That's why, like, hardcore Wyoming. Okay. I think that there is, like, if the press is going to report on these as if then at least ask 5 of the people what if they were driven there, if they were paid to be there, like, do some due diligence, because they're reporting on it. It just doesn't add up that in hardcore 80%, Republican Wyoming, that's the reflection of what's going on. It doesn't add up.
Yeah. I will say, though, I think the Michael Bennet one was real. And I think,
sure.
and let me just add for people, Michael Bennett's one of the most moderate, composed, thoughtful senators there is. So the fact that he went there, he is also thinking of running for governor, and his Achilles is with the base, not the moderates. So, like, the fact that he did lean into that, I think there may be a little bit of an ulterior motive for him, but it does speak to, as of, Thursday morning, the base is chomping at the bit to not let up against Schumer. And that is going to be a problem for Senator Schumer, who I think was hoping by the end of the week, we'd be talking about the Department of Education, not, Chuck Schumer.
That's why I said earlier, I think, this is, again, another moment today where the Democrats on education, this is their wheelhouse. Like, if you're a Democrat and if you blow today, at some point you literally have to just tap out and say, like, bring in the lefty, let's go. Because this is, if this event today, the conservatives are so fired up. This is something that Reagan brought up in the 80s. The idea that we're finally doing this is huge for the movement. And if Democrats blow the response to this, you literally should just say, hey, we're going to sit this one out. We're going to look for some draft picks in 28. We're going to trade to the Greens or something. I don't know what you do politically in terms of the trade deadline. But that's it. If I can, before we just take questions, I'd love your take on this. The call yesterday with Trump and Zelensky, I think, again, Mark's always saying we don't want to look backwards, but I think this was, like, say what you will, maybe Zelensky obviously was very careful with what he said, but you're seeing the progress there. It was, I think, a very positive call. There wasn't, Zelensky might be hamstrung in terms of what he can say, but the Europeans surely aren't. And there was not much blowback after that call with Zelensky that seemed to, at least on both sides, go very well.
Yeah, I think to your point, Zelensky's not dumb now. He knows that his best play is to be quiet, to not show up Trump or question him. I think it sounds like the call went well. Look, the issue is not Zelensky right now. It's Putin. So it's, you know, he no sooner did they hang up than he attacked Ukrainian energy infrastructure, which he had just agreed not to do. So, you know, we'll see. We also have on the agenda, and it's a segue to something Sean said, which is if the Democrats can't get their heads either you know what on the Department of Education, they should go home. Well, the probably second topic, if they can't get their heads either you know what, would be Trump's Social Security gambit here. And I think, you know, Mark has it on the agenda. I think the idea that, you know, and this is a million things being tossed out at once, and it's hard to kind of keep up with all of this. But Doge is moving on Social Security now. And one of the things that they announced here is that they are going to shutter teleservices for Social Security because there is the Social Security Administration estimates about $100 million a year, 100 million, not billion, a year in fraud, people misrepresenting themselves to try to get Social Security benefits. And they're going to require people to come in person. For a lot of elderly people who don't live in cities, that is a hard thing, right? The Social Security office may be an hour and a half away and they don't have access to a car or whatnot. So this is a gamble. You are now going to start touching the ability to deliver services the way they have been delivered to date. At the same time, they announced that the IRS customer service lines are being trimmed back 50%. This is something that I know well from my H&R Block days. Real people rely on that. Like, where's my refund is the number one thing people call about. Sean and I may think, why don't you just go online and look it up, which you can do, but that's not, you know, my mother doesn't like to go online to look up anything, right? She wants to call somebody. So we are going to see, you're eliminating the Department of Education, you're starting to hit Social Security. How do Americans feel as this goes about? Sean, what are your thoughts?
So, you know, I know that every once in a while, sometimes I'll pull something out of left field to make the analogy, but this morning it was interesting that and this is your world, not mine. It's what is it called? The MTA in New York, the metro there. They're getting rid of the cards.
Yep.
Okay. So, which I thought I find funny because the left always says that, you know, that when we talk about check cashing and they require people start saying that they're no longer going to accept cash, that's discriminating against people. So in New York City, completely run by the left, in a state run by the left, they're getting rid of MTA cards because it says it saves them like $20 million to print these cards. And you can, you know, it's tap and swipe now. You put your phone up and go. I'm one of those guys. Same thing with your mom. I like phone calls. I like physical cards. You know, I get that, but it's just funny when the party does reforms that make sense in New York City, getting rid of them, that makes total fiscal sense. When the Social Security office can point to thousands and thousands of people still on the rolls at 150 years old, God bless them, it makes sense to maybe at some point prove your identity, right? I had to go in the other day and I have a box that I get mail at. And they require now that you go in and with 2 IDs to prove, and I don't know if it's going to be annually or whatever, but I got a notice that said your box is up for renewal. Within 30 days, you must come in with 2 forms of government ID. Again, that's more of I assume some kind of like terrorism or money laundering thing. I don't know. But the bottom line is that, like, yes, welcome to the world. Like, there are people scamming the system. Social Security is going bankrupt. So you can either look at ways to help save it, maybe on the periphery to save money, to stop fraud, or, you know, or just keep going. And so maybe the first few steps, you know, or we're going to require people to go in, or you can continue to allow potential massive fraud on the system so that someone doesn't have to go into the office. Let's just be clear. If you have a child, if you get married, you have to go to a Social Security office. Okay. So I get it. This is at the older end of life, but you know, I you know, when you're talking 65, that's the new 45. So it just, at some point you can't have it both ways. You can't allow the fraud to exist and then say, hey, one of the ways to do this is to allow people to come in and validate themselves at some point. Once in your life, have to do that isn't exactly the strong. I get it. It's a pain in the ass, but there's a lot of government benefits that you have to do that for.
Look, I I hear you in the way I and my family live our life. Like, it makes complete intuitive sense. Where I learned about this was when I lobbied for eBay on postal reform and was like stunned at how many people in the modern era rely on the post office for so many things, 6 days a week. I was like, sure, why don't you go to like 3 or 4 days a week? And why don't you close half of these? Like, don't you use email? Don't you? So I'm just saying, it's the real lives of real people.
I get it.
That even though we can argue you should, rely on more modern services, you should use your iPhone to use Apple Pay versus an MTA card. I'm just saying, there will be people who are going to speak, and it is often in the most rural conservative areas that they are, they like it the way they like it. So we will see.
I guess my point is, Dan, the problem is it's at some point the system gives, right? So you can say, yes, this sucks. I don't want to drive to a Social Security office. Look, this isn't about old or young. I hate those things. I hate going to the DMV. I hate it. It's a waste of time. It's inefficient. But the bottom line is, at some point, something's got to give. And adding efficiencies, all of these people, I've got this clip that I'm going to play on my show tomorrow, this montage. Nancy Pelosi, Bill Clinton, Al Gore, you name it, have talked about getting rid of inefficiencies, modernizing systems. It was never a problem when the Democrats did it. And suddenly the roosters are coming home and we got to make some changes. Everyone goes, oh my God, what about these vulnerable communities? Where were the problems with them then?
Yeah. Well, as I say, we're going to find out. That's the rub. The last topic here, and then we'll get to all of you. I know we're running a little late here. Just the Tesla and the Musk derangement syndrome. Just for time's sake, I'll just be really quick. Vandalism and physical violence, no bueno. Like, the party needs to condemn that in the strongest terms. Like, it's unacceptable that people are burning Teslas, keying them, that people are feeling unsafe because of the car they drive or whatever. Totally unacceptable. And I wish the party would come out and say it. On the idea of using humor and kind of targeting, Musk, so to speak, with like, stick to business, not Doge, or, hey, Tesla's declining. Look, in the modern era, people troll, they use humor. Like, our commander-in-chief does it very well. Musk has gotten into the game of trolling Democrats. Like, the verbal kind of taunts, to me, that's politics, but you just cannot allow violence.
There's a dude going viral right now that is using his own feces on a Tesla. It's literally, ridiculous. It's not even just, it's actually kind of pathetic and scary that's like, so I agree with you wholeheartedly on the violence. It's just, to me, and it's also stupid. It's an American car company that employs 80,000 people in California that several pension funds are invested in. You're literally rooting for your fellow citizens to fail. This is insane. You can hate Elon all you want. Go online, do whatever you want to do, protest, hold up signs. I don't really care. But just, to me, regardless of what you think about Elon, the idea of attacking an American company whose multiple state pension funds, et cetera, are invested in it. And Tim Walz might want to, I know he was a teacher, but he must have missed the class when he realized that as a teacher, his own pension fund is invested in Tesla. So just on his own selfish, benefit, he might want to actually think twice about wanting that stock to tank.
And then look, just as the right cheered Anheuser-Busch's decline when they did the, thing with the gay right. I mean, in the modern era, people kind of vote with their pocketbooks in terms of brand affinity and some
I'm
people
for it. No.
Right.
But
so,
listen, if you say, but here's my point. Number one, if you don't want to buy a Tesla, don't buy one. Right. But I think the other thing is, for what it's worth, Anheuser-Busch in that particular case lost its way. That was a separate, and people just said, hey, I'm not going to buy the beer anymore. You don't want to buy a Tesla, don't buy it. But if you're a Democrat, you might want to realize that you're actually rooting against the very people that you say you care about. That's the dumb part about this. The Anheuser-Busch is a bunch of union workers. I mean, like, say what you will, but Tesla is an American company in California that employs 80,000 employees. These are the people that you guys are supposed to have their backs, right? So, I mean, you talk all the time about missing the memo. That's the memo, bro. Yeah. These are the people. And like I said, just on your own, all of those public employees' pensions funds are invested in Tesla. you're rooting against yourself. This isn't even, this is just a bad, stupid argument.
Yep. All right. Well, to be continued. All right. So we're going to bring in people here again. For those who are joining late, Mark was here, but had to get on a flight out of Milan. Hopefully he wasn't running from the law. All right. Unless Sean, unless you have a different opinion, I'm going to just start at the top here.
Are we going to talk about Tom Sandoval, Justin Baldoni? There's a lot that we need to cover.
Okay. Ken Lammy, unmute yourself. I love the American flag. If you're a pirate. All right. How do we unmute him, folks? Kenny? Okay.
No,
Ken, can you unmute yourself? No? Do you see the... Nope. Let's see.
On it.
All right, there you are.
Okay, great.
Ken, where are you from?
I live in South Shore in Pembroke, Mass.
I was going to guess that. That's very...
Speaking of town hall plants, is this a Spicer family member? No.
No.
All right.
And that
what's on your mind?
That flag is on the Eagle, which was when they had Sail Boston, and had a
Coast Guard cutter
floating around Boston Harbor, and took that picture. So,
well done.
A couple of things I wanted to talk about, mostly to Sean, and that's Republicans not doing a good job of communicating what sort of the philosophy around rejiggering the government. And by that, I mean, if you look at what Doge is trying to do, the challenges, we have a huge history of this in business, okay, that people wrote about. That started, I don't know if remember a book by Robert Townsend, Up the Organization, where he talked about how you have to go in and disrupt. And you look at Jack Welch in the 80s, what he did with GE, and they called him Neutron Jack because he fired so many people because the company was sort of out of touch and had gotten bloated like our government is right now, and how he had to really eliminate so many jobs, and he was criticized. He wrote a book, Winning, where he detailed a lot of that. Another book, In Search of Excellence. So all of these books that have outlined what business has done to improve operations of their organization. The Republicans in the White House just sort of, they went willy-nilly into Doge. There's a reason why you have to move quickly. There's a reason why it's a huge challenge to change a mammoth organization like the federal government. And I don't think the Republicans have done a very good job in communicating that. Not just in the White House, but even, senators, congressmen, they're not communicating the fact that running businesses is hard. Running an organization like the federal government is enormously complex and difficult. And you need sometimes some very painful and drastic measures to make that happen. Now, the president has talked about that a little bit, but I don't think the Republican Party, the senators, congressmen have done enough to send that.
So can I? Yeah. So let me just jump in. I don't disagree with you. I think that there can always be more. There's a whole host of books on what they call change management, right? So a company's being taken over. Right. How do you communicate to employees? I get it, and they can always do more. A couple quick points, though. Most of the senators and the congressmen really aren't in the loop, and that's part of the problem. Is that they're finding out, hey, we just did this, we did that, so it's hard for them. And I will tell you, at least on my experience, if I were asked, from my, a potential boss, I'd say, hey, let's just wait and see how this goes before we get out and say something. We might want to see how this plays out because you don't want to get out in front of something that we don't have all the facts on. So that's number one. Number two is, like I said, I'll start it by saying I don't disagree with you. The more that you can communicate to people and explain why you're doing what you're doing and the ultimate goal, you usually get a better result. That being said, I think there's this recognition in Washington of in the Trump administration of two things. Number one, time is short. We got a year, maybe a year and a half to really get this done. So just do it, right? And if we stop and try to explain it, and that plays into the second point, which is the more that we're pausing to explain it gives the other side an opportunity to stop it. And we just need to plow forward, and we'll do a lot of it. So again, I don't disagree with what you're saying. I think that their view is let's just get it done and then we'll worry about that all later. That's my take.
Yeah,
Well,
and I think the other thing you got to remember is Trump didn't really run on this during the campaign. Like if you watch his rallies and the two debates, one against Joe Biden and then Kamala Harris, there was passing reference to like government needs to be reformed, but like let's be honest, he did not condition the country to say like on day one we are going all in. In fact, the one place you saw it, Project 2025, like to be serious, they were like, no, that's not us. Like we have nothing to do with it. So one, usually you sell your agenda that you're about to step into office, and they didn't do that. The second thing is I always go back to this. When Jack Welch did that, by the way, a Massachusetts native, and other kind of legendary CEOs, they were very upfront. Here is the vision of what's going to come out the other end. Here is why we're doing the necessary steps to kind of take a step back, so to speak, to take two forward. There is no explanation, not from cabinet secretaries and not from Trump or Elon Musk, of what the other end looks like. There isn't. And that's where, to Sean's point, you're like, if you're a member of Congress, you're like, I want to be careful how much I own this, because if it becomes a disaster, hey, I was not consulted, I had nothing to do with it, and they'll criticize it.
Well, I agree, and that's I guess my point is that this hasn't been communicated, and that's troubling. One
it's
of
an opportunity for Democrats.
One of the
sure, Ken, go ahead. Yep.
Mark asked for ideas about two-way some time ago, and it hit me that there's a tremendous amount of accumulated knowledge, wisdom, and experience with the members. You know, you look around and there's a lot of gray hair, gray beards that are members. So just the thought that maybe addressing some ideas, putting ideas out there and looking for feedback might be something to consider in the future, because there is a lot of, you've had some great comments made by participants over the last several months. And I just wanted to sort of follow up and say that'd be a good idea to reach out to the community even more for how do we deal with ideas? How do we thresh out the ideas?
Call it the members club. Yeah, I like it. All right. And nothing wrong with gray hair, by the way.
Yeah.
All right, Ken, thank you so much. Yeah, that's right. Thank you so much for joining. Professor Kenny, the man, the myth, the legend.
Kenny, don't make me regret this.
Yes, I know.
Seeing it in the chart, in the chat.
Gonna be in the penalty box.
Yeah.
Can you unmute?
I'm unmuted.
All right, there he is.
Thanks for calling on me. Sean, you won't regret it. I'm going to talk about the Department of Education.
Hit it.
I think I think it's too simple to say, let's get rid of it. It is a disaster, though. The problem is now you throw it to the states. And Jen from Oklahoma in the chat brought this up, and I have this experience too from living in New Hampshire. Then it becomes the homeowners and their property tax funding education. And the problem with that is you have a lot of homeowners that don't have kids. And they're the ones paying for the education. And it depends on, and what are the states going to do if the federal government gives them money to subsidize education? Who's going to monitor that? It's very simple to say, well, we just throw it to the states and let them handle it. Because then now you're talking economics. If my property taxes go up and I don't have kids, I'm going to be unhappy.
That's how it works now. You have a lot more people overseeing it. It's no different. The difference is you're getting rid of all of the people that have to do a PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah.
As opposed to just block. We're talking about the same thing. We're just removing people.
Yeah. Well, it's a big waste.
But look, those people, maybe not all of them, play a role. There is a purpose to why they are there. And it's easy to just say get the bureaucracy out of the way and everything will flourish. But there is a reason. And to your point, Professor Kenny, I said this before, oftentimes states put money into kind of the middle, right? The mean, and it's all around that then starts to struggle. And the accountability, like Sean, you're saying the money goes to the local jurisdictions. They look, they're politicians as well, right? And so one of the reasons we have a federal government is to try to ensure kind of, greater access for the whole versus some. So, we're going to see. This is a big gambit. I mean, this is going all in to literally eliminate a department.
But here's a now. So here's my question, Dan and Sean. Are you guys, or were you guys? I don't know how old your kids are now. I know, Dan, you said your kids are like 15, but you're involved in their education. Am I correct to ask you that? To ask that question?
I mean, full transparency. We're incredibly blessed and fortunate to be able to afford to send our children to private school.
Right. But the reason why I'm asking this question is I think that's what our problem is in this country, is because parents are not as engaged in their children's education as they should be. And I think they look at, schools as more as a babysitting club than instead of being, like I'm concerned that my kid
but you know what, Kenny,
is being educated.
But in fairness,
yeah.
Yes, there are those parents who don't pay attention when they should, and they have the time to, and they choose to do other things. There are tens of millions of parents who they both work. They both work very long hours.
2 jobs.
Yeah. And look, here in New York City and when I lived in DC, Sean, I'm sure you can speak to this as well. Like, public schools provide meals for kids who might not otherwise get meals at home. Right. I mean, one of the reasons schools don't get out as early as they used to at the end of the year is it keeps kids off the street to kind of go longer. So, yes, we can argue that shouldn't be the role of the schools, but there are real lives of real people. There's a reason we went to this, to try to ensure that if a kid has food in his stomach or her, they're going to pay better attention. They're going to be more awake, and they'll hopefully be better students than if they're sitting there starving.
Yeah, and that comes through the Department of Agriculture.
Yes.
So again, I look, Kenny, I think they're all good points. I would just say the bottom line is all we're talking about is taking a bigger cog out of the wheel.
Yeah.
And then the discussion that you're having is a valid one, but it's a separate one. Like, nothing's going to change whether or not we, and first of all, I think a lot of parents are very engaged and very frustrated. Anyway, I would just say that part of this is to start to help the problem. There's just too many. I think we talked to the superintendent, a couple months back. There's too many times when the parents want to be engaged, when the teachers want to be engaged, and the federal government is in the way. So great discussion. I think we should do it. Put a pin in this one and have a whole nother show.
Speaking of great discussions, how do you like that team for a segue? Mr. Moynihan, welcome.
That's a lot of pressure.
It is a big day here. Welcome to the Two-Way family.
Thank you very much, Dan.
Tell us about your show and what's coming up. How you think about it?
Well, I hope it can be as good as this one, with such great people in the audience giving you lectures behind an enormous picture of Tom Seaver. So bless the professor for the great Tom Seaver background. I don't know how to do that, but mine would be Jim Rice. No, today is the launch of this show. And, I've been doing a show with my friend Matt Welch, who's at Reason Magazine. Used to be at the LA Times, and my friend Camille Foster, called The Fifth Column. And that's a all politics show all the time. This will be, I think, probably half politics and about half, other things. So we're starting with politics. And today we're starting with, of all people, Anthony Weiner, because I ran into Anthony Weiner and we had a very rip-roaring discussion about politics. The man has lost none of his fire and heat that he used to deliver on the floor of Congress. So I said, look, can we have this conversation again at the beginning of my show? And he said, yes. So it will be interesting to see what Anthony Weiner thinks about the future of the Democratic Party and his career, because he said, I saw him in an interview with Piers Morgan about a year ago. And he said, I asked for a second chance before. I won't be asking for a third chance. He is now, of course, asking for a third chance because he's going back to where he started. He's running for city council. Yep. So that'll be fun. And, we're going to be all over the map. There was an article in the New York Times this week about a woman named Laura Delano, who wrote a book about depression and about SSRI medications and why we should all get off of them. And it was so controversial that they had to shut down the comments in the New York Times. But she's going to be on Tuesday, so we're trying to mix it up and do a couple of different things. And we've got some really, really interesting guests and some big name guests, and I'm extremely excited for it. So I hope we don't face plant today.
Well, that's awesome. And I will say you have like maybe the best audio I've ever heard. Like it is
now.
Buttery, it's smooth. Like you're off to a good start there.
And can I tell you, Dan, that I'm in my daughter's bedroom. And nice. There is a North Korean poster behind me, but that's my doing.
I saw that. I was wondering if there was like a subtle, I was going to ask you what that.
I hate communists, so I have posters of all the crappy communists from the world. This one's an East German one. This one was brought back from North Korea by a friend of mine who was visiting. But yeah, so I have a good mic, and we try to have good audio, and we're doing this actually in a studio setting. And one of the requirements that we're trying to adhere to is that everyone be in studio for interviews, because it's just kind of a different dynamic. And trying to do something a little bit more like an old school talk show in a way. A bit. I'm trying to think of who the model would be. Probably Dick Cavett. I think it's a Dick Cavett. So
what about Phil Donahue?
Not Phil Donahue, who is
Regis,
a little too commie for me. Regis, I'm a shouty guy, so Regis in a way, but no Phil Donahue. Because no, not my politics.
Well, good luck. So what time is it launching tonight?
4:00. It will be live on two-way, and I think we're going a little longer today than an hour, because we have a great guest who's also the sponsor of the show at the very beginning, is my dear friends from FIRE. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners know the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. It used to be in education. It was specifically kind of an ACLU for the university, but now it's broadened its scope, and we're going to have a little debate about some of these deportations and the legal aspects of it. So we have one of their lawyers coming on. We'll be doing that after Wiener, and then we'll have people on to debate those issues and to tell us what they think about it. So yeah, 4 to maybe 5:30, maybe 5. Who knows? It's the internet. So we'll go as long as we can manage. So
that's awesome. Well, I used to see Anthony Weiner at Chelsea Piers. His son and one of our kids played hockey, and I once asked him about the Mets. Y'all have no idea, but he's an entertaining guy. Love him or hate him.
Look, I watched, and I recommend people to just revisit if you haven't seen it since. In 2016, of course, this documentary came out called Wiener, and it was about his run for mayor. And then the third scandal comes out when he's filming it. And I watched it again last night, and it is utterly fascinating documentary and a weird slice of political history, because we all know what happens with that laptop and James Comey and the emails that are found on that laptop. And, this kind of butterfly effect of Trump's victory in 2016. So rewatch that documentary if you can, after you're done watching the Moynihan Report, by the way. So,
well, thank you, Michael. Good luck to everyone.
Thank you, Dan and Sean.
Please tune in. And after Michael, because he's not going to go to 6, in addition to Mark, and tonight, Mr. Spicer, what do we have coming up tonight? Who?
Thursday is our panel. This is when we have fun. I love Thursdays on our show. It's, to me, my favorite show. Obviously, great guest, but just to break down the issues of the week. So Thursdays is really fun. By the way, I said this before the show. I've had Alan Dershowitz on the show between Newsmax and now probably 25 times. Yesterday, if you want some weekend viewing or whatever, last night was epic. And he broke down the judges stuff, like the legal, and his mind is so amazing when it comes to the legal constitutional breakdown. But then he gets into the Epstein files, and I'm telling you, holy smokes. I thought it was a throwaway question, because he had obviously, personal level, he teed off. He has seen the list of who's on it, and he is bound by court order not to share it, but he went off. And I'm telling you, I did not think I was going to get the response that I did. So it's up on my YouTube page. And by the way, just a point of personal privilege, because Mark's not here and no one can stop me. I was proud. I announced last night I'm entering the banking world. I was invited to join the board of Old Glory Bank, which is a really cool bank that that is sort of focused on actually banking and not woke stuff, which is what Bank of America and these other groups are all about, kicking people like even the Trump organization off their bank. And Old Glory Bank's got John Rich, Larry Elder, Governor Mary Fallon. So I'm not really sure what I bring to the table, but I'm excited. So,
well, I'm sure they could use your wisdom. Well, that's awesome, man. Congratulations. That is always a very prestigious thing to be put on a board. So good luck to you. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. A reminder, Mike will be on at 4, and Mark will be on two-way tonight. And Sean will also have his panel tonight, and I'm sure we will have something to talk about tomorrow. So we'll see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. Enjoy your day.
Take care, guys. Good luck, Michael.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.